"You'll drive that truck or you're fired," my boss said, pointing at a chemical tanker with brake fluid pooling beneath it. The route sheet showed it passing my daughter's elementary school. Wesley Prospero Hart stared at Colin Reich across the cluttered office, then at the inspection forms with yesterday's date and today's deadly cargo. 3 chemical haulers with brake systems that belonged in a junkyard, all scheduled for school zone routes. "Dad, are you coming to my science fair presentation today? I'm doing my project on truck safety. Mrs. Peterson says real truckers are the safest drivers in America because they protect families like ours." Emma's voice crackled through his phone speaker. The irony hit Wesley like a punch to the gut. His daughter was excited about her truck safety presentation just as he discovered their chemical tanker had no brakes and was scheduled to drive past her school in 2 hours. 23 years of perfect safety record. And now his supervisor wanted him to drive a rolling bomb past Emma's classroom. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy will be there." He ended the call and photographed the brake pad with trembling hands, the camera flash illuminating corrosion that looked like cancer eating through steel. 23 years of clean driving record. 23 years of never cutting corners on safety, never taking shortcuts that might endanger innocent lives. Now his new supervisor, Colin Reich, wanted him to drive a rolling bomb past his own daughter's classroom, past hundreds of children whose parents trusted that DOT regulations meant something. The depot office light flickered on across the lot. Colin's black BMW pulled into the supervisor's spot, arriving 2 hours earlier than usual like a predator sensing opportunity. Wesley pocketed his phone and headed for the confrontation that would change everything. His boots crunching across gravel that had witnessed decades of honest work by drivers who believed safety mattered more than profit margins. "Morning, Wesley!" Colin didn't look up from his tablet as Wesley entered the cluttered office. Corporate efficiency charts covered every wall, all showing red arrows pointing down except for one labeled "Profit Margin Per Load," which climbed steadily upward like a stock market graph during a bull run. "We got problems, Colin. 3 trucks on the morning roster have brake issues that'll kill somebody if they leave this lot." Colin's manicured fingers kept tapping his tablet, scrolling through delivery schedules and route optimizations that treated human lives as variables in an equation. "Define problems, Wesley. Be specific about your concerns." "Tanker 47 has brake pads worn to bare metal. The friction material is completely gone. 43 has hydraulic leaks in 3 separate lines, and the brake fluid reservoir is nearly empty. 31's air brake system is failing intermittent. I watched the pressure gauge drop 40 psi in 10 minutes. None of those trucks should leave this lot until they're properly repaired." Colin's expression remained unchanged, but his fingers stopped moving. "Trucks passed inspection yesterday according to our maintenance records." He slid 3 pre-signed DOT inspection forms across his desk with the casual indifference of someone dealing cards in a rigged game. "Clean bills of health on all 3 vehicles. Must be different eyes looking at them today." Wesley picked up the forms, noting yesterday's date, yesterday's signature, and today's scheduled loads. The maintenance inspector's signature looked suspiciously similar to Colin's handwriting. "You're asking me to falsify federal safety records and endanger public safety. I'm asking you to drive trucks that passed official inspection to customers who are expecting their chemical deliveries on schedule. Our efficiency ratings are down 12% this quarter, and Phoenix Corporate is breathing down my neck about operational flexibility and cost management." The regional manager made it clear that drivers who can't adapt to modern efficiency standards will find themselves replaced by more cooperative personnel. Operational flexibility doesn't mean driving death traps past elementary schools where children are learning their ABCs. Colin finally looked up from his tablet, his desk nameplate reading Operations Supervisor in gold letters that reflected the fluorescent lights like fool's gold. His eyes held the cold calculation of someone who measured human lives in quarterly reports and stock option values. "Wesley, you've been driving for this company since before I was born, back when the industry operated under different paradigms. 23 years of stellar service under the old system. But times change, markets evolve, and the industry demands adaptation to survive in a competitive landscape. Drivers who can't adapt to modern operational realities find themselves displaced by more flexible personnel. The threat hung in the air like chemical fumes from a leaking tanker. Wesley thought about his mortgage payment, 3 months behind since Angela's school district cut teacher salaries. Her teacher salary barely covered Emma's asthma medications that cost $400 per month, and their health insurance had a deductible that might as well have been measured in millions. At 46, starting over in a young man's industry meant accepting whatever scraps remained after younger, hungrier drivers took the premium routes. But Emma's face flashed in his mind. 8 years old with pigtails and gap-toothed smile, trusting her daddy to keep the roads safe for families like theirs. I won't drive unsafe equipment past schools where children are trying to learn. Period. End of discussion. Colin's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind his eyes. Then Danny Flores will drive them. He's always eager for extra shifts, especially with his own financial pressures mounting. Wesley left Colin's office with a sick feeling that had nothing to do with diesel fumes. Danny Flores had 2 kids of his own at Riverside Elementary, Miguel in 2nd grade and Sophia in kindergarten. The Hart family kitchen buzzed with typical morning chaos. Angela graded papers while scrambling eggs, her red teacher's pen marking incorrect math problems between bacon flips and coffee sips. Emma practiced her science fair presentation to her stuffed animals lined up on the breakfast counter like a classroom of attentive students. Trucks have special safety systems to protect people, Emma recited to Mr. Bear, her favorite teddy bear who wore a tiny hard hat Angela had sewn from scraps. Air brakes, hydraulic systems, and DOT inspections make sure chemical trucks never hurt anybody. My daddy drives one of these trucks, and he's the safest driver in Montana because he loves children and would never let anything bad happen to them. Wesley's coffee turned bitter in his mouth as he listened to his daughter's innocent faith in systems that Colin Reich was systematically corrupting for profit. How's work going, honey? Angela kissed his forehead, leaving a spot that smelled like vanilla perfume and hope for better days. You look stressed this morning, more stressed than usual. New supervisors pushing some operational changes. Nothing I can't handle, but it's creating challenges. Well, don't forget the parent safety meeting tonight at 7:30. Half the neighborhood is worried about all these chemical trucks using Riverside Road as a shortcut to avoid the new way station on Highway 90. Mrs. Patterson says her prize roses are dying from the chemical fumes, and the Hendersons are concerned about property values declining due to industrial traffic. Wesley's phone buzzed with an incoming text. Danny Flores. Colin fired me this morning. Same trucks, same safety problems you reported. He's setting us up to take the fall when something goes wrong. Meet me at Big Sky Truck Stop in 1 hour. Bring Kevin Walsh if you can reach him. Emma hugged Wesley's leg with the fierce love only 8-year-olds possess. Daddy, will you sit in the front row for my presentation? I want to make all the truckers proud and show everyone that chemical transport can be safe when good people do the right thing. Wouldn't miss it for the world, sweetheart. Daddy will be there cheering you on. But as Wesley drove toward Big Sky Truck Stop, he wondered if he'd just lied to his daughter for the first time in her life. Danny Flores looked like he'd aged 5 years overnight. His usually jovial demeanor had been replaced by the hollow stare of a man watching his world collapse around him like a controlled demolition. He sat in a corner booth of the truck stop diner, surrounded by photographs spread across the Formica table like evidence from a crime scene that nobody wanted to investigate. 22 years with TrailPoint, Danny said without preamble, his voice carrying the weight of a career destroyed by corporate greed. Never had an accident, never failed a DOT inspection, never missed a delivery deadline. Colin terminated me at 6 this morning for failure to maintain operational standards and refusal to comply with established safety protocols. Wesley slid into the booth across from his friend, noting how Danny's hands shook as he poured sugar into coffee that had probably been sitting on the burner since midnight. What operational standards did you supposedly violate? Refusing to drive Tanker 31 with failing air brakes through the school zone? Danny pushed a photograph across the table with the careful precision of someone handling evidence. "Look at this brake line, Wesley. Corroded through in 3 separate places. I told Colin it needed immediate repair before the truck could be certified for operation. He handed me a pre-signed inspection form and said the truck had passed safety inspection yesterday according to company records." The photograph showed brake lines that looked like Swiss cheese, metal eaten away by years of chemical exposure and deliberate neglect. Wesley pulled out his phone and showed Danny his own pictures from the morning inspection, creating a gallery of mechanical failures that would make federal investigators salivate. Same pattern across multiple vehicles. 3 trucks, same safety violations, same pre-signed inspection forms with yesterday's date. It gets worse, much worse. Danny spread out more photographs like a dealer revealing a losing hand. "These are from the last 6 months. Every truck that failed inspection, every driver who reported problems, every safety violation that got covered up with fraudulent paperwork and corporate doublespeak." Wesley studied the images with growing horror. Hydraulic fluid leaks that could cause total brake failure at highway speeds, air brake systems held together with duct tape and prayers, chemical containment seals that wouldn't hold back water, let alone industrial acid capable of dissolving human tissue. "Why didn't you report this pattern to DOT federal investigators?" "I tried 3 different times. Filed separate safety complaints with documentation each time. But every inspector who showed up was some guy named Peterson, who spent exactly 10 minutes looking at Colin's paperwork and signed off on everything without ever walking the maintenance lot or examining actual equipment." A heavy hand landed on Wesley's shoulder. Kevin Walsh slid into the booth, his face carrying the grim expression of a man who'd just received an offer from the devil himself. "Danny filled me in on the phone during my drive over here. Colin just offered me Danny's routes plus a 20% bonus if I can start immediately with no questions asked. 3 chemical loads scheduled for delivery through residential areas." Kevin pulled out his route sheet, the paper trembling slightly in his weathered hands. "Including a chlorine shipment that goes directly down Riverside Road past the elementary school during morning recess." Wesley's blood turned to ice water in his veins. "That's Emma's school route. That's where my daughter will be playing outside during PE class." "Gets worse than that." Kevin's voice dropped to a whisper as if Colin might be listening through the truck stop's ventilation system. "The parent safety meeting tonight? Colin's been monitoring all the neighborhood complaints through some contact in the city planning office. He knows parents are organizing to petition for chemical truck restrictions in school zones. These deliveries today are his way of forcing the safety issue before new regulations can be implemented." Danny leaned forward across the table, his eyes reflecting the desperation of a man watching his profession being corrupted by corporate greed. "Kevin, you can't drive those trucks. The brake systems are fundamentally compromised. You'll kill somebody, maybe multiple people, including children." "I need the work, Danny. You know my situation." Kevin's voice cracked with the strain of impossible choices. "My mortgage is 3 months behind, same as Wesley's. Medical bills from Sarah's cancer treatment have destroyed our savings. My kids need to eat, and at 45 there aren't many companies willing to hire drivers my age." Wesley's phone rang, cutting through the tension like a fire alarm. Angela's name appeared on the screen. "Wesley, emergency at the school!" Panic edged her voice like broken glass. "Chemical truck jackknifed right in front of the main building during morning recess. Kids are being evacuated through the emergency exits. I can smell chlorine gas seeping into my classroom through the ventilation system." Her voice became muffled as she moved away from other people. "Emma's class was outside for PE when it happened. I can't find her anywhere." The phone slipped from Wesley's numb fingers like his world was dissolving. Danny caught the device, heard Angela's terrified voice continuing to describe the chaos, and his face went white as hospital sheets. "It's starting," Kevin whispered, staring at the route sheet in his hands. "The accidents aren't accidents. They're calculated operational outcomes." Wesley was already running for his truck, leaving coffee and photographs scattered across the table like evidence of crimes not yet committed. Riverside Elementary looked like a battlefield from a chemical warfare movie. Emergency vehicles lined Riverside Road, their red and blue lights painting the scene in apocalyptic colors that would haunt neighborhood dreams for years. Parents ran toward the school while police officers pushed them back behind yellow tape that fluttered in morning breeze, carrying the acrid smell of industrial death. A chemical tanker lay on its side in the school parking lot like a sleeping monster, white vapor pouring from its ruptured tank in clouds that made the air shimmer with toxicity. The truck bore Trail Point's corporate logo, Safe Transport on Time Delivery, now a bitter mockery painted across tons of twisted metal. Wesley vaulted the police barrier and sprinted toward the building, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged animal. A paramedic in full hazmat gear grabbed his arm with latex-gloved hands. "Sir, you can't go in there. Active chemical exposure situation. We're implementing full evacuation protocols." "My daughter's inside that building. My wife's a teacher here." The paramedic's grip tightened, and Wesley could see genuine concern behind the protective mask. "We're evacuating everyone right now using emergency procedures. Chlorine gas exposure affects children differently than adults. 15 kids are being transported to Billings General for emergency treatment." Wesley's knees almost buckled under the weight of parental terror. 15 kids? How bad? The ones who were closest to the truck when it rolled and ruptured. Severe respiratory distress, chemical burns on exposed skin. We won't know the full extent of injuries for several hours, but children's developing lung tissue is particularly vulnerable to chlorine damage. An ambulance screamed past them, its siren dopplering into distance and despair that seemed to echo off every building in the neighborhood. Through the rear window, Wesley glimpsed a small form on a stretcher. Oxygen mask covering a face too young to understand why breathing had suddenly become a battle for survival. "Emma!" Wesley broke free from the paramedic's grip and ran toward the ambulance bay where more vehicles waited like mechanical vultures. "Wesley!" Angela stumbled out of the school building, her clothes soaked with water from the emergency chemical shower systems. Chemical burns marked her arms and neck like angry red fingerprints, testament to her exposure while helping evacuate her students. "Emma's in the first ambulance. Severe respiratory distress and chemical burns on 40% of her body. They're taking her directly to pediatric ICU." A black BMW pulled up behind the line of emergency vehicles, its pristine paint job contrasting sharply with the chaos surrounding it. Colin Reich stepped out, straightening his silk tie and scanning the disaster with the detached interest of someone reviewing quarterly financial reports. He walked directly toward Wesley with purposeful strides, his expression a carefully calculated mixture of false concern and plausible innocence designed to deflect liability. "Terrible accident, Wesley. Absolutely tragic and completely unforeseeable." Colin shook his head with practiced sadness while his eyes remained cold as January. "This is exactly what happens when drivers ignore established safety protocols and create unauthorized operational modifications." "What the hell are you talking about?" "The driver of that truck filed a safety complaint yesterday morning claiming the brake system was compromised beyond operational parameters. I personally explained that the truck had passed federal inspection, showed him the signed DOT compliance forms, but he insisted on creating additional paperwork instead of following established operational procedures." Wesley felt reality tilting, like the world had shifted off its axis. "You're blaming the driver for this disaster?" "Company policy is absolutely clear on this matter." Colin produced a tablet computer and showed Wesley a legal document with official letterhead. Kevin Walsh signed a formal acknowledgement this morning accepting full personal and legal responsibility for any incidents involving equipment he chose to operate, despite company assurances of safety compliance and federal certification. The words swam before Wesley's eyes like hallucinations. Kevin had been desperate enough to sign away his life and the lives of innocent children for a 20% bonus and the chance to keep food on his family's table. "You murdered those kids with corporate greed and deliberate negligence." Colin's expression didn't change, maintaining the same corporate mask he probably wore to shareholder meetings. "I followed established company procedures and federal regulations." Kevin Walsh made unauthorized modifications to approved safety protocols against direct supervisor instructions. The legal and financial liability rests entirely with his operational decisions. 2 hours later, Wesley stood in the pediatric ICU watching machines breathe for his daughter. Emma's small body looked impossibly fragile beneath the tangle of tubes and wires that connected her to life support systems. Chemical burns covered 60% of her skin in angry red welts that would leave permanent scars as reminders of corporate evil. Dr. Beatrice Martinez pulled Wesley aside, her face carrying the grave expression doctors reserve for life-and-death conversations. She was young for such responsibility, probably in her early 40s, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone who'd fought too many battles against preventable tragedies. The chlorine exposure caused severe respiratory damage to Emma's developing lung tissue. We have her on mechanical ventilation, but her lungs aren't responding to standard treatment protocols. The next 72 hours will determine whether she suffers permanent lung damage. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I need you to understand that children's bodies process chemical trauma differently than adult physiology. The concentration she absorbed could potentially cause permanent neurological damage affecting cognitive development. Wesley sank into a plastic chair that had supported countless other parents through their worst nightmares. Emma's science fair project lay crumpled on the bedside table, pages scattered like broken dreams. Real truckers are the safest drivers in America because they protect families. His phone buzzed with an incoming text message from an unknown number with corporate formatting. TrailPoint Legal Services. Mr. Hart, please be advised that preliminary investigation indicates today's incident resulted from driver error and unauthorized safety modifications implemented against company policy. Company insurance will contest any liability claims related to this incident. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately for violation of operational safety protocols and failure to maintain company standards. Legal action may be pursued for your contributory role in today's events. Wesley read the message 3 times before its full meaning penetrated his shock. They were blaming him for Kevin's accident. Colin had somehow manipulated the paperwork and legal documentation to make Wesley responsible for an accident involving a truck he'd refused to drive. Another message arrived, this one forwarded from Angela's phone. Colin's legal team just served papers at the hospital. They're suing you personally for negligent supervision and safety protocol violations that contributed to today's chemical exposure incident. Frank Morrison's garage smelled like motor oil, honest sweat, and the righteous anger of a man who'd spent 40 years keeping trucks safe and drivers honest. The retired TrailPoint supervisor had transformed his workspace into a war room, surrounded by engine parts and faded safety certificates that represented decades of genuine concern for public welfare. Colin Reich's been running this systematic fraud for 3 years across multiple states, Frank said, spreading files across his workbench like a general planning military strategy. Started the pattern in Phoenix, refined it in Denver, perfected it here in Montana. Always the same operational methodology. Cut maintenance costs through deliberate negligence, falsify federal inspection records, then blame individual drivers when inevitable disasters occur. Wesley studied the documents with growing horror and rage. Similar accidents in 4 different states. Chemical spills, catastrophic brake failures, mechanical disasters that killed innocent people while company executives counted profits and celebrated efficiency improvements. 17 people confirmed dead so far from his operations, Frank continued, his voice carrying the weight of preventable tragedies. 12 of them children under the age of 10. Colin's cost-cutting operations have saved his various companies over $2 million in maintenance expenses while generating more than $8 million in insurance payouts. Insurance payouts for equipment they deliberately sabotaged? Here's the truly evil part of their scheme. Frank opened his laptop computer and navigated to a stock trading website that displayed financial data in real time. Colin's holding company systematically bets against their own stock prices before each planned accident. When disasters tank the stock values, they make millions on short-selling positions while simultaneously collecting insurance money for damaged equipment they never intended to maintain properly. Wesley felt physically sick as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. They're systematically murdering people for financial profit. Gets significantly worse than simple murder for money. Frank pulled up another document on his computer screen. Federal investigator named Patricia Henley has been tracking Collins' criminal pattern across state lines for over 8 months. She's built a compelling case, but she needs inside evidence to make federal charges stick in court. Recordings, authentic documents, proof of intentional negligence and conspiracy. The laptop screen flickered to life with a video conference call. A woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and prosecutor's eyes stared out from the webcam with the intense focus of someone who dedicated her career to stopping corporate criminals. Mr. Hart, I'm DOT Inspector General Patricia Henley with the Federal Task Force investigating interstate trucking fraud. I'm deeply sorry about Emma's condition and your family's suffering. I've been investigating Trail Point's systematic safety violations for 8 months as part of a larger multi-state criminal conspiracy. Wesley leaned toward the screen, desperate for any path toward justice. What exactly do you need me to do? We need you to go back to work for Colin Reich wearing a federal recording device. Get him talking about his operational procedures and safety management philosophy. We need him on record admitting he had knowledge of mechanical failures and made conscious decisions to operate unsafe equipment anyway. He terminated my employment this morning and is threatening legal action. Patricia smiled with the grim satisfaction of a hunter who'd been tracking dangerous prey. He'll hire you back within 24 hours. We're going to make him an offer he can't legally refuse. Wesley returned to Trail Point wearing a federal recording device. Colin's office had new motivational posters everywhere. Wesley, good to see you back. I hope Emma's recovery goes well. She's still on life support. Children are resilient. We'd like to offer you Kevin Walsh's routes, plus a substantial bonus. You fired me yesterday. Temporary action. We need our most experienced driver on those school routes to reassure parents. What about the brake problems I reported? Colin spread maintenance records across his desk. All vehicles have been thoroughly inspected and certified safe. You knew those trucks were fundamentally unsafe when you sent them past the elementary school yesterday. Colin's practiced smile never wavered, but his eyes sharpened with predatory focus. I know everything about my fleet, Wesley. Every bolt specification, every hose rating, every system component and its operational parameters. Sometimes acceptable operational risk becomes unacceptable outcome, but that's the inherent nature of industrial operations in a competitive marketplace. We calculate statistical probabilities, implement safety protocols, and manage operational consequences within acceptable parameters. Wesley felt his pulse racing as he realized Colin had just admitted knowledge of the mechanical problems while the federal recording device captured every incriminating word. So you're admitting you knew the brake systems were compromised when you authorized those trucks to operate in school zones. I knew the brake systems were operating within statistically acceptable parameters for normal chemical transport, operations under standard conditions. The accident occurred because Kevin Walsh deviated from established operational protocols without authorization. He attempted unauthorized route modifications that exceeded the equipment's designed operational envelope. Pure corporate doublespeak designed to provide legal deniability, but the recording device was capturing Colin's admission of knowledge about brake problems while maintaining plausible legal cover through technical language. What about the chlorine gas that poisoned 15 children, including my daughter? Colin's expression hardened almost imperceptibly, revealing glimpses of the psychopath beneath the corporate facade. Chemical releases during transport incidents are unfortunate, but statistically foreseeable outcomes in hazmat operations. Our comprehensive insurance coverage and legal frameworks anticipate such operational possibilities. The important consideration is maintaining operational continuity while effectively managing public relations impacts and liability exposure. Wesley realized he was listening to a complete psychopath describe child poisoning as a manageable public relations problem with acceptable financial implications. Will you accept the position, Wesley? 50% salary increase, full benefits restoration, and comprehensive company support for Emma's ongoing medical expenses. Blood money. Colin was offering to pay for the medical treatment his criminal negligence had made necessary while using Wesley's reputation to facilitate future crimes. I need time to consider the implications. Don't deliberate too long, Wesley. Community pressure is building rapidly for chemical transport restrictions in residential areas. We need experienced drivers in those school zone routes before politicians start making emotional decisions that negatively impact operational efficiency and profit margins. Wesley left Colin's office and drove directly to the FBI field office in Billings, his hands shaking with rage and determination. Patricia Henley met him in a secure conference room filled with photographs, legal documents, and evidence boards that resembled a serial killer investigation. Outstanding work, Wesley. We recorded everything we need for comprehensive federal charges. Patricia rewound the digital recording and played Colin's voice. I know everything about my fleet. Sometimes acceptable operational risk becomes unacceptable outcome. That's not exactly a detailed confession of criminal intent. Combined with the falsified inspection records, systematic stock manipulation, documented bribery of federal inspectors, and the established pattern of similar incidents across 4 states, it's more than sufficient evidence. We're executing arrest warrants tonight. Tonight? Why the urgency? Colin's planning another calculated accident. Our surveillance indicates he's prepared 3 additional trucks with deliberate mechanical failures for tomorrow morning's school zone routes. If we don't stop him immediately, more children will die while he profits from their suffering. Wesley thought about Emma fighting for every breath in the pediatric ICU, her small body scarred by corporate greed. What do you need me to do? Go home to your family. Stay safe. Let federal law enforcement handle this operation. Wesley drove toward home as the sun set behind the Montana mountains, painting the sky in colors that reminded him of Emma's crayons. His phone rang just as he turned onto Highway 90 for the final stretch home. Wesley, this is Colin calling. We need to meet immediately. There's been a significant development in yesterday's incident investigation. What kind of development? The kind that requires immediate risk management and damage control. Meet me at the depot in exactly 30 minutes. Come alone, and don't involve anyone else in this conversation. The line went dead with ominous finality. Wesley pulled over and immediately called Patricia Henley's direct number. He knows about the federal recording device, she said without hesitation. Do not go to that depot under any circumstances. We're moving the arrest operation to tonight instead of tomorrow. Wesley's rearview mirror exploded in a shower of glass and metal fragments. A black SUV with tinted windows had rammed his truck from behind, sending him skidding toward the highway guardrail at dangerous speed. 2 additional vehicles appeared ahead, blocking both lanes of Highway 90 with military precision. Men with automatic weapons got out of the SUVs, moving with the coordinated efficiency of professional killers. Wesley floored the accelerator and aimed his truck directly at the narrow gap between the blocking vehicles. Gunshots shattered his windshield as he crashed through their roadblock, spinning onto the shoulder and careening down a steep embankment toward the river below. His truck rolled 3 complete times before slamming into a stand of cottonwood trees with bone-jarring impact. Wesley crawled out through the shattered passenger window as flames began licking hungrily at the fuel tank behind him. His cell phone miraculously still functioned. Patricia Henley answered on the first ring. Wesley, we heard automatic gunfire. What's your exact position? Highway 90, mile marker 47. Colin sent professional shooters to eliminate me. My truck's about to explode. Emergency services and federal backup are en route to your location. We're executing all arrest warrants immediately. Wesley's truck exploded behind him with a shockwave that knocked him flat against the rocky ground. In the distance, he could see multiple vehicles with flashing lights racing toward the Trail Point Depot. Colin Reich was finally out of time, and justice was coming with federal badges and arrest warrants. Dawn broke over Trail Point hauling services as FBI agents swarmed the facility like antibodies attacking a deadly infection. Wesley watched from inside a paramedic's ambulance as Colin was led out in federal handcuffs, his corporate composure finally cracking under the weight of inevitable justice. "This is operational sabotage and industrial espionage!" Colin shouted at television news cameras, his voice cracking with desperation. Corporate competitors are using federal agencies to undermine legitimate business efficiency through fraudulent allegations. Even facing serious federal charges, he continued speaking in corporate buzzwords and victim narratives. Agent Patricia Henley approached Wesley's ambulance, her face displaying grim satisfaction mixed with professional pride in a job well done. "We seized Colin's computers and financial records before he could delete the incriminating files. Federal forensic accountants found evidence of systematic stock manipulation worth over $12 million, insurance fraud spanning multiple states, bribery of federal safety inspectors, conspiracy to commit murder for financial gain." What's the status of the other children in the hospital? All 15 kids are expected to make full recoveries according to medical reports. Emma's showing significant signs of improvement. Her doctors believe she'll be removed from mechanical ventilation by tomorrow afternoon. Wesley closed his eyes and felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since the accident. A mixture of relief and rage that justice was finally possible. "There's additional good news," Patricia continued with satisfaction. Colin's criminal operation was part of a much larger interstate network. Holding companies across 6 states have been running identical scams. This federal investigation is going to save hundreds of innocent lives and prevent countless future tragedies. 3 months later, Wesley sat in the federal courthouse listening to prosecutors describe Colin Reich as one of the most callous corporate criminals in American legal history. The evidence presented was overwhelming and undeniable. Falsified safety records spanning years, systematically murdered children for profit margins, financial fraud that treated human lives as acceptable losses in quarterly earnings calculations. Colin's high-priced defense attorney argued desperately that his client was simply an efficiency expert implementing standard corporate cost reduction strategies approved by shareholders and board members. Judge Harrison's response ended that pathetic argument permanently. "Mr. Reich, you systematically endangered public safety for personal financial profit. You deliberately poisoned innocent children to inflate stock prices and insurance payouts. You sent professional assassins to murder a federal whistleblower who tried to protect innocent lives from your criminal enterprise." Judge Harrison's voice carried the absolute moral authority of American justice. There is no punishment available in our legal system that could possibly be adequate to match the magnitude of your crimes against humanity. Colin received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison without any possibility of parole. $50 million in restitution payments to victims and their families. Permanent lifetime ban from any transportation-related business operations. As federal marshals led Colin away in shackles, he turned toward Wesley with eyes full of pure hatred and corporate entitlement. "You destroyed an efficient business operation to protect your own legal liability. Modern operational flexibility requires acceptable risk tolerance and difficult decisions." Even facing life imprisonment, Colin still couldn't comprehend that children weren't acceptable casualties for corporate profit margins and shareholder value. 1 year later, Wesley Hart testified before the United States Congress about comprehensive trucking safety reform legislation. Emma sat proudly in the visitors' gallery, fully recovered except for faint scars on her arms that served as permanent reminders of how corporate evil could be defeated by ordinary people with extraordinary courage. "Chemical trucks carry the essential building blocks of modern civilization," Wesley told the packed congressional hearing room. "But they also carry the potential power to destroy entire communities if operated by people who value quarterly profits over human life and public safety." The Chemical Transport Safety Act passed both houses of Congress unanimously within 6 weeks. The legislation mandated comprehensive federal oversight of all hazmat transportation operations. real-time electronic monitoring of safety systems, strict criminal liability for corporate executives who knowingly operate unsafe equipment. Emma applauded enthusiastically from the gallery as her father explained how ordinary working people could defeat corporate monsters by refusing to let evil hide behind efficiency reports, profit margins, and shareholder value. As Wesley finished his testimony to thunderous applause, television news reports showed Colin Reich in federal prison watching the congressional hearing on a television bolted to his cell wall. The man who had treated children as acceptable business expenses now spent his remaining days making license plates for the federal government at wages that barely covered prison commissary purchases. Justice wasn't always perfect, but sometimes it was complete and deeply satisfying.